The following is a sponsored program paid for by First Alliance Credit Union. Welcome to Good Money Moves, featuring Jenna Taubel from First Alliance Credit Union and Andy Brownell. Here's Andy Brownell on Rochester's News Talk, 1340 KROC AM and 96.9 FM.
It's time for Good Money Moves here on News Talk 1340 KROC AM and 96.9 FM. I'm Andy Brownell, along with Jenna Taubel, Director of Brand and Digital Member Experience at First Alliance Credit Union. Good morning, Jenna.
Morning, Andy.
So last week, we talked about putting the budget together for a family vacation or just a vacation. What's the Good Money Moves topic for today?
Yeah, so today we're going to continue talking about home buying, actually. A couple weeks ago, we did talk about maybe some home buying mistakes that you should be avoiding. But this time around, I wanted to give some tips for buying your first house. And I mean, let's be honest, even if you're buying a second house, these might be good reminders as well.
Sure.
The home buying process really is different from buying just about anything. And if you're a first-time home buyer, especially, it can be really easy to just feel overwhelmed. So with that in mind, I thought I should probably just share some tips today that will just help make that home buying experience a little bit easier.
All right. This should be a good topic. I remember our first home was the home we built. So add on times 10 the amount of stress involved.
Yeah.
So obviously, it can be a very scary thing to buy a home. It's the biggest investment for most people at least, the biggest investment they'll ever make.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get to these tips. What are some great tips to home buying?
Yeah, my first tip really would be don't rush things. When a lot of people decide to buy their first house, their first thought is to go out and buy the first home they like before someone else does. And then you can move all your stuff in as quickly as possible. And you're just kind of done with the whole thing, right? You can start living that dream life. But it's really understandable to kind of have those aspirations, especially in a market where houses go for sale pretty quickly, and they do sell very quickly. So if you rush into buying a home, though, you're going to discover that, and you're going to discover this after it's too late, unfortunately, once you've actually moved, that maybe this isn't quite the house that you wanted. Maybe it's too small. Maybe the appliances are more outdated than you realized. Maybe it's haunted, like we talked about back in October around Halloween, right?
Or it's just settling.
Oh, yes. But worse, it might even have issues that you will have to hire a contractor to come and fix for you, which is it can be very costly. So really, instead of rushing into buying a house, take some time beforehand and really plan things out. Make a list of the requirements you want in a house before you go house hunting, right? Do some research into the real estate market and get a sense of how fast houses are selling, how much time you'll have to that you'll really have to make a decision once a house goes on sale. Are they turning over in less than in like 24, 48 hours? Is it more like a week? Is it 2 weeks? Kind of get a sense for how long houses are on the market, so you really have a sense of the urgency to maybe go look at a house that you are interested or not. And really, again, the big takeaway here is just take some time to plan beforehand and do research before you ever step foot into a house that you're considering buying, because the more you have upfront understanding the market that you're in, what it is that you're looking for in a home, even how much you have to maybe put into fixing up a home if you find one you really like that's maybe not quite so perfect. Those are the things to really be thinking about before you ever start actually looking at houses.
Especially if you only see one house and don't give yourself the opportunity to see another house, you might have a skewed sense of what is actually possible for your price range.
Exactly.
And with my kids, I remember when they were in home buying mode, of course, although we lost out on that one, or we got to get this one. And I said, guess what? It may take a little while, but another house will come out for sale. It's never going to be the very last house on the market.
Right. And it's okay to be picky. This is a huge investment, and this is going to be where you're living for a significant amount of
Yep.
time. It's not like an apartment that you can just, okay, well, the lease is up, I'm going to go find somewhere else. I don't like it. This is a much larger commitment than that. I think, and my realtor probably hated me, but I'm pretty sure that we looked at 70 houses before I bought something. I'm not even joking.
But on the flip side of that, if you actually do find a house that matches your needs and your wants, you should act quickly
Oh, yeah.
on that one.
Yes.
Okay. What other tips do you have?
Yeah, so another one that's really important is, and I kind of alluded to this just a moment ago, but know how much house you can actually afford. And that's really a good rule of in general for, first-time home buyers who might not quite understand what that means. It's really just knowing that, you know what, that house is going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, which most of us realistically are not going to be able to just shell out in cash up front. That's why there are mortgages. But really what that means is understanding how much you can afford to make in monthly payments on that mortgage. And you also want to consider, as you're thinking about this, not just the mortgage payment itself, but any property taxes and home insurance costs, premiums that you're going to need to roll into that as well, because you have to pay property taxes even if you buy it outright, and you have to pay insurance on the house even if you bought it outright. So those are part of that monthly cost that you need to be considering when it comes to how much you can afford to pay.
And likely your electric bill will be more than what you paid renting.
Yeah. Yep.
Garbage disposal.
All kinds of extra
Heating,
things that you need to think about. Yeah. I mean, and to kind of take a step back, yeah, there's a lot of different factors that play into what your budget's really going to look like. Some of it you can estimate some of really well, some of it you can't. But if let's say if you're renting, a good place to start is by saying you can afford at least as much as you're paying each month for rent. And from there, you can start figuring out how much more you can safely afford to spend, if anything. So, and like you mentioned, definitely be considering that the electric bill is going to jump up. Definitely consider you might have to start paying for things like natural gas or waste removal, other bills that you maybe aren't paying for now, but are rolled up into maybe your rent in some way. So just depends where you rent. But those are things to start thinking about and consider when it comes to kind of determining how much house you can really afford. And once you have that good estimate of how much you can really afford to spend month to month on paying for this house, you can use that information to see how much house you can then afford, because how much you can pay monthly will influence how big of a mortgage you can actually take out.
That's actually a good way to look at it. Don't think of it as the price of the house. Think of it as your monthly payment and your lifestyle.
Exactly.
Okay. And I know a lot of people have no idea how much they'd be able to afford.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the easiest thing to just figure out, but at the same time, like if you have any expenses whatsoever now, you can kind of again start to build out that budget, what that would look like for you on a monthly basis. Especially, your income's not likely going to change in the few months that you're going through this process. You're not likely going to take out a bunch of new debt during this process. Actually, I would encourage you not to do that. So really, you're just looking at what am I spending now? And if I could afford a house at the same price as the rent I'm paying, plus or minus whatever utilities are or aren't included in that cost already, right? You can kind of work backwards to then say, okay, well, if I can pay this much for my mortgage each month and I'm going to take out a 30-year mortgage, a standard fixed mortgage, whatever. Obviously, there's many other different types of mortgages, but that's a whole different show. You can start to kind of backtrack and calculate that out, what that's going to look like for you.
I imagine it's way better to have that number in your head instead of going, okay, when they pre-approved me for the loan, they said I could afford a house up to this, even
Hmm.
though that may not be realistic for you, whatever the maximum was, and you start looking at these places that ultimately you really can't afford.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you start out by looking at nice houses and then you just end up having to kind of adjust your expectations down the road, and there's probably a good chance you're going to be a little bit disappointed with the houses that actually end up in your price range. They always show these half million, million plus dollar homes on TV for the middle income family, but realistically, those houses are not what most people are living in anywhere in the country. So you can kind of get this vision in your mind about what you're going to be looking at when in reality you're looking at something that fits the bill, but maybe isn't quite as polished. And that's okay. I mean, let's face, the fact is that there are nicer houses available. Don't let that take away from the joy of buying your first house.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I could live in that nicer home. I just wouldn't be able to eat.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What are your financial priorities? Is it to have the biggest house, or is it to still have income available to do other things that you enjoy in life?
All right, we're talking about tips for buying a home. First time home buyers and more. Those looking maybe that's the third or fourth time we've gone through this. Jenna Taubel with First Alliance Credit Union with us. We'll be back with more of Good Money Moves in a moment on News Talk 1340 KROC AM and 96.9 FM.
Good Money Moves continues in moments with Andy Brownell and Jenna Taubel from First Alliance Credit Union. This is News Talk 1340 KROC AM and 96.9 FM. We're talking Good Money Moves with Andy Brownell and Jenna Taubel from First Alliance Credit Union on Rochester's News Talk 1340 KROC AM and 96.9 FM.
Welcome back. Good Money Moves. Jenna Taubel with First Alliance Credit Union. This morning we're talking about tips for buying a home, whether it's your first, second, third, or fourth home. Jenna, what's the next tip?
Yeah, so we kind of talked already about, timing and some pre-research you should really be doing before you even get started on your home buying journey. We talked about making sure that you can really afford any house that you will be looking at and really understanding what your budget looks like. But another really big piece in this process is knowing what your credit score is. Your credit score is really going to be your biggest ally when it comes to getting a mortgage, that's especially a mortgage that's affordable. With a high credit score, you're not only more likely to get approved for a mortgage, but you're also more likely to be paying that lower interest rate, just like on any other type of lending product that we've ever talked about on the show. Mortgages follow the same rules. So you need to make sure your credit score is in a good range before you start thinking about buying a house. Fortunately, these days it's pretty easy to kind of keep tabs on what your credit score is looking like, especially if you're a member of First Alliance Credit Union. You can very easily check it in your online banking account or in the mobile app. You can also check it on sites like Credit Karma or Mint. Ideally, you want your credit score to be as high as possible. Every financial institution is going to have different parameters and rules around who they will and won't lend to based on credit ratings. And some of them have access to special programs for borrowers who maybe have lower credit scores and still want to get into a house. So there isn't necessarily a perfect credit score to tell you to aim for, but just know that the higher the better. And if your credit score is lower, I would say, under 650, you probably want to start taking steps to really improve your score before you approach a financial institution about accessing mortgage funding. And there are ways to do this that are fairly easy, right? That we've talked about how to improve your credit score before on this show, but it's things like making sure that all of your bills are paid on time, pay down high interest credit card debt, And you can even, get a copy of your credit report as well. I would, from one of the three kind of major credit reporting bureaus, and really take a minute to just look through and see if there are any unpaid debts that you've maybe forgot about that could be dragging down your score, or maybe there's something attributed to you that shouldn't be. You just want to take some time to kind of clean that up if there are anything going on in there that shouldn't be, because you don't want that information dragging down your credit score unnecessarily. Getting approved for a mortgage, I wouldn't say that's necessarily difficult, but it's also a very, it's a big loan that you're going to be taking out.
Yeah.
And so you don't, the higher you can get that credit score, the better at the end of the day.
So if you didn't do what you're talking about here and get your things in order and make sure you have a reasonably high credit score, and you applied for a mortgage and it was rejected, is that going to lower your score even more?
No.
Okay. I was just curious.
Yeah.
And the other aspect, if I do get approved for a mortgage and I have a relatively low score near the bottom of the qualifying range, whatever that is, how much more of a higher interest rate is it a significant difference? Let's put it that way.
It's really difficult to pin that down, and I'm sorry
It
that I
all
have to talk in
depends.
generalities, but it
Yep.
depends, on the different lending institutions and their guidelines, and really where your score falls in that range. And I mean, there's a lot of factors that play into that,
But
it's just
clear,
hard to know. But yes, if you have
higher your score is, the lower interest rate will be.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
There's a direct correlation. I guess that's
There
what I'm trying to get
is. Yeah.
at.
You will save a lot of money on your mortgage
Over
payment
30
by
years,
having a higher credit score when you take out that mortgage. Absolutely. It will benefit you for a long time.
Okay, so a bad credit score can completely derail the process. So if you flat out, they can tell you, no, we're just not going to approve a mortgage for you. Okay, what else should the first-time home owner know about this going in?
Yeah, so I think it's important as well and I kind of alluded to this a little bit already when we talked about planning your budget around how much house you can afford, but taking some time to show that, you're really serious about being a home buyer, and having a plan in place, or having shown that you are maybe setting aside some money in reserve for extra expenses and, things like that, are going to help give a little bit of confidence to the lending institution. They may still not be able to offer you a loan at that time just because of your credit rating, but they may be more willing to work with you down the road if they know that you're serious about raising your credit score, and you're serious about, being a home buyer, and you're taking it seriously by, planning ahead for, the things we talked about right before, factoring in those utility costs, and that they're probably going to go up when you buy the house. Having kind of a budget plan in place for other expenses like home maintenance costs, home insurance. You're going to start collecting a plethora of tools to fix your house. Furniture for your house. If you're moving from a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartment to a 3 or 4-bedroom house, you're going to probably end up buying some more furniture. And you should also think about, what extra costs you might be encountering, during the home buying process overall as well, right? Appraisal fees, government fees, origination fees, inspection fees, all kinds of stuff that kind of comes up throughout the process that you may not have thought about beforehand, but is going to cost you money, and you will have to have that money available to pay.
All right. All good stuff to know. I mean, like you said, it can be overwhelming when you start to think about all the different aspects of this. Yeah. So arm yourself with knowledge for sure. We're talking about buying a home, tips for buying a home. It's Good Money Moves, back in a moment on News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9 FM.
Good Money Moves continues in moments with Andy Brownell and Jenna Taubel from First Alliance Credit Union. This is News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9 FM. We're talking good money moves with Andy Brownell and Jenna Taubel from First Alliance Credit Union on Rochester's News Talk, 1340 KROC AM and 96.9 FM.
It's Good Money Moves. The topic today, tips for buying a home. And Jenna Taubel with First Alliance Credit Union is with us. And I guess make it simple. What's the next tip, Jenna?
Yeah, so if you've kind of gotten to the point in the process where you've made an offer on the house, and usually those offers are contingent on the home passing a home inspection. And so this is a really important part of the home buying process that you do not want to skip or take lightly. So it's really important that you are very attentive during this process and that you are present when the inspector is doing their walkthrough in the home that you're planning to buy. So, just keep in mind what the inspector says about the house, especially if they point out an area that might become a problem in the future. Those are things you want to make note of. Sometimes you'll have to fix those things by yourself. Sometimes you'll have to hire a contractor. So just make a point to start saving some money for those types of expenses that they start pointing out to you if you do intend to continue to buy that house after the inspection is completed. You should also kind of, while they're doing their inspection, be inspecting the home yourself. There are plenty of small things that may not be worthy of noting on, the inspection, or that they might miss just because they're more focused on bigger issues and bigger parts of the home, right? So things like loose shelves, maybe worn spots in the carpet, or, whether the deadbolt is loose or hard to lock, or, whatever, those types of little things that you are going to want to probably fix up front. But inspectors are human and they do make mistakes too. So I have actually an interesting story of a coworker who recently bought a home, and they went through, they did the inspection, everything came out pretty nice. But what they started, once they were living in the home, they noticed that the clothes dryer in the house didn't seem to be working. And they finally figured out that it was because even though the dryer had a nice large hose running up to the dryer vent in the wall, the previous owners had re-sided the house and sided right over the exit for the dryer vent. So there's nowhere for all that moisture to go and escape.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So the home inspector missed that very important detail, and it didn't occur, obviously, to the coworker who's a brand new homeowner, that the reason the clothes weren't drying is that, well, they had basically, removed the dryer vent when they did that. So obviously I had to remove some siding and cut some holes in it and fix it. And then it was a fairly easy fix, but still, those are the types of things that can happen.
That is wild. I thought, the previous owner, you would have thought at some point, why aren't my clothes getting dry?
Yeah, absolutely.
Any final tip for us or tips?
Yeah. So, and I kind of alluded to this earlier in the show too, but buy a home for the long term, right? Most people do not want to go through the process of buying a home every couple of years, right? Packing up your lives, moving to a new place. And that means that when you're looking for your house, buy it with the intention that you and your family will be staying there for quite a while, right? Think about whether you plan on having or expanding your family in the near future. What solutions are available if you do need more space, or is there room for an addition? Those are kind of expensive though, so maybe you want to find something that has room already. Are you going to want to remodel certain rooms eventually? A lot of times, bathrooms and kitchens tend to get outdated after several years, and people want to update those, but those again cost money. So these are all really to just help you make sure you get a house that's meeting your needs for a longer term than just the short term.
Fantastic information, as always, Jenna. And of course, I'm sure there's a lot more out there that we simply just don't have the time to cover it. So I'm going to count on you to fill us in on where we can tap into additional resources.
Absolutely. So as always, I encourage our listeners to visit our website, firstalliancecu.com. You can subscribe to our blog. We release new financial tips and advice every week. You can listen to past episodes of this show at firstalliancecu.com/podcast or on krocnews.com. You can also subscribe to Good Money Moves on Apple, Google, and Spotify podcasts. And if you love our show, please take a moment to leave a review on your favorite podcasting platform. And of course, if you have a financial topic that you'd like us to cover or questions you'd like answered on Good Money Moves, please send me an email at marketing@firstalliancecu.com. Of course, I also strongly encourage you to reach out to our team at First Alliance Credit Union. They are here to help you start making good money moves today.
That is First Alliance Credit Union, federally insured by NCUA and an equal housing lender. Jenna, thank you so much again.
Of course.
Jenna Taubel with First Alliance Credit Union. I'm Andy Brownell. This has been Good Money Moves. We'll be back next week on News Talk 1340, KROC AM, and 96.9 FM.